Ready? Okay. Heather, ready? Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to the Committee of Adjustment hearings for Suburban Panel 2. We are a City of Ottawa quasi judicial tribunal that holds public hearings to consider Planning Act applications, including minor variances to the zoning requirements and consents to sever land. Our hearings are now in person at Ben Franklin Place, 101 Centerpoint Drive. We also enable remote participation by video conferencing for our registered speakers. We are live streaming on YouTube and the video will be archived and available for future viewing by the public. My name is Fabian Poulin. I'll be chairing today's hearings and you can address me by my name or as chair. And with me are my fellow panel members, Jay Baltz, George Barrett, and Heather McLean. The procedure for the hearings will be as follows. Listed on the agenda and appearing on screen from time to time are the applications we'll hear today. For the sake of efficiency, I may deal with agenda items in a different order. Panel members have reviewed the planning reports and any written submissions in support or opposition to each of the applications. Today, we'll hear any oral submissions relating to the applications. As part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property in question before the hearing. They also had to confirm in writing that they did so, or they'll need to swear or affirm an oath today that they fulfilled the sign posting requirements. Otherwise, we may have to adjourn or postpone the hearing. The panel may ask for a brief presentation of an application, followed by questions for the applicant and city planning staff. We will then hear from members of the public who have registered to speak and may also have questions for them. Finally, the applicant, who has the burden of proof, will have the opportunity to make final comments and reply. Please address your comments to me as the chair, starting first with your name, spelling it if necessary, and your municipal address for the record. All presentations are limited to 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at my discretion. At the end of the hearing, the panel may either make an oral decision or we may reserve our decision, which means it won't be delivered today. Either case, and within 10 days, the Committee of Adjustment will send the official written decision and reasons for it to all parties, participants, and anyone else who has requested a copy. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure we'll be following today? No questions, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest on any of the applications on this panel or any other panel? Mr. No. No declarations of interest? We have to confirm minutes of past hearings, and I'd like to ask the panel for approval of the minutes of August the 6th, 2024. All those in favor of these minutes, please raise your hands. Those are affirmed. And then August 20th, 2024, please also raise your hands if you agree with these minutes. Those minutes are also affirmed. We have a few adjournment requests, specifically 2. And the first adjournment request we have is for 1224 Place d'Orléans Drive. And I'm looking for Bruce McCall. Are you available, sir?
He is online, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. McCall.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. We have a request for an adjournment of your application sine die. Are you in agreement with that, sir?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application to be adjourned sine die. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application has been adjourned sine die, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And the next application up for adjournment is 37 Tower Road. And I'm looking for Mr. Dean Hanish. Are you available, sir? Mr. Hanish, are you available?
I don't see him online either.
Okay. Can somebody from our group give him a call and see if he's going to be joining us, and we'll put it at the back end?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to items that are unopposed and they're on the fast track agenda. We have 2 items that are on this agenda. The criteria for being on this agenda are as follows. No objections or concerns from the parties, that is the applicant, city, or the public. There are no amendments required, no registered speakers. Sign posting declaration has been received. Applicant or the air agent has confirmed that they agree with all requested conditions, if there are any, and no questions from panelists. So the two applications we have today is having to do with 3095 Palladium Drive. Mr. Eisner, are you available?
He's online, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. Eisner, this is on a fast track agenda. We're going to ask the panel if they agree with this application being approved.
Hello.
Panel, do you approve this application?
Before approval, I have a question. Have all the conditions been removed?
Yes, other than the committee's standard conditions.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Okay. So all those, I'd like to ask panel if they're in favor of this application being approved. All those in favor, raise your hands. Your application has been approved, Mr. Eisner.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And now moving on to item number 4, having to do with 10 Meadowlands Drive. Mr. Yusuf Abu Ziribe. I hope I didn't hurt that too bad. Are you available, sir? Please have a seat. So, how do I say your last name? Okay, thank you. Sir, we have fast tracked this application, which means that we can make a decision on this right now. I want to confirm that you agree with all 11 conditions. Okay. You have to hit the green button. Great, thank you. Again, I'd like to confirm that you agree with all 11 conditions for this application to be approved.
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you very much. I now like to ask the panel if they agree to approve this application with all 11 conditions. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next application that we will hear today is having to do with 340 Poulin Avenue. I'd like to see Mr. Peter Hume, if he's available, and Allison Clark. Good afternoon.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of committee.
I'd like to ask you to give us a brief description of your application today, sir.
Absolutely. So this is a request for minor variances at 340 Poulin Avenue. The committee will recall in 2022 that this was before the committee and a suite of variances and a consent application was approved at that time. And I think I have a brief presentation that will show you the site plan that you approved before and the minor variances. I will tell you that the consent has lapsed and we're not seeking to reinstate the consent. The minor variances were seeking, at the time, there were 5 of them. We're seeking actually 3 to reinstate 3 of those minor variants, I guess renew, reinstate, reauthorize. The 2 with respect to lot area that were approved have been accepted by Building Code Services, so we don't need to renew those. So let me give you a little bit of background. So what happened was the consent expired, but the applicants went forward with a new building envelope and filed for a building permit. Building Code Services came back and said, we accept the lot area variances as acceptable given the plans, but you've changed the plans and I'll go through that in a minute for you. So you have to go back to the committee to reauthorize some of your variances. So that is why we are here today to seek reauthorization of 3 of those variances. And so I guess the issue before, or why are we back? Well, this application was heard prior to Bill 23, which fundamentally changed the way that prospective developers look at development applications. As you know, Bill 23 added what we now call accessory or not accessory additional dwelling units. So in that framework, the proponent looked at the building that he had proposed and determined that it really didn't meet the intent or the ability to access those additional dwelling units that the province has approved. And I think it's important to talk about that for a minute, because a lot of the comments that you've received have been about how can they be putting additional dwelling units in these buildings. Well, I mean, as we know, Bill 23 has, by provincial law, said that each single semi and townhouse can have additional dwelling units within them. So they are as of right. And I know the public doesn't have a large understanding of that. So the applicant, in light of Bill 23, came back and re-looked at their floor plate and their template for development, and changed a bit of the building framework in order to take advantage of Bill 23, and that's why we're here. And the variances are side yard variance, a front yard variance, and a corner side yard variance, in keeping with the variances that were sought originally. What we're not seeking is a variance to the rear yard, and I know that was a concern of some of the comments, that the rear yard variance was very small, or the rear yard was very small. And I'm telling you that the rear yard is in conformance with the existing zoning bylaw. So it is not proposed to be reduced or changed. So the real variance that I want to just talk about a little bit more is I don't know if we can put up the presentation, which is the front yard variance, if I can, just to touch on that built form.
You have about a minute left, sir.
Yeah. So, and then in any event, the proposed front yard variance is 3.66, and when you start to look around the street, you see a variety of front yards. As close as, if you could go to the next one after that one. The next slide, it would be, or the next two slides, if you would. Doesn't want to go. Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
It's okay. You've got some time.
Yeah. It's important to understand that the impact or lack thereof of that, what I consider to be the most important variance.
For those of you online, we're having a little difficulty on the technical side, so we'll just.
That's okay. Technology is wonderful when it works. When it doesn't, not so much. Okay, so the next one. So there you go. Now this is part of a presentation you received in 2022 with respect to the various front yard setbacks in the neighborhood. And you can see that directly across the street, the front yard setbacks are 4 meters from the property line. There's one that's 3.9, 4.4 across the street, 4.1 in various areas. So quite a diverse set of setbacks. And so, you look at that on a plan and you look and you say, well, what does that actually mean? So I when we were out, we took some pictures. If you could go to the next slide. So this is a picture looking southbound. So you're looking up the street to our neighbors. That's at the corner of Poulin and Con. And you can see that there's quite a bit of vegetation that's going to be that's not ours, that's retained by our neighbors, so when the building is sited, it's not going to be clear that it is bigger or it is closer to the street than its neighboring properties. And the other picture is directly across the street, facing northeast. And as you can see, the vegetation shields the actual location of the house. So whether it's further or closer, what you see is it's quite a varied streetscape. So if you go to the next slide.
30 seconds, sir.
Yeah. And so this is directly across the street, and these are 4 meters from the property line. And as you can see, so in facing the street, our will be 3.66 meters from the property line. Those are 4. It's going to be almost indistinguishable from our neighbors across the street. So I'll leave you with the planning staff response, which I'm sure you've read. They have no concerns with this application. They believe that the building form is appropriate and meets the intent of the zoning bylaw with no negative impacts. And we have tested this against the 4 tests in the Planning Act and are satisfied, the staff are satisfied, as are we, that it meets the 4 tests, and we can just go through those quite quickly. The variances are minor adjustments to the zoning bylaw to allow for low-rise intensification. It's consistent with the official plan, the intent of the additional dwelling units provisions, and it's not going to present a streetscape that is out of character with the surrounding neighborhood. The variance is desirable. It's low rise intensification. It's consistent with the direction of the official plan. It's zoned R2F, which allows semi-detached, and the existing land use patterns won't be negatively altered, and the intent of the official plan is maintained. This is an involving neighborhood designation, so it's anticipated that there would be some changes to allow a little bit of intensification within the R2F low-rise zone. So,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Chair,
sir.
that's my presentation.
Thank you. Now I'd like to ask the panel if they have any questions for Mr. Hume. Mr. Baltz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I have 2 questions. So one, there was a letter from the neighbors at 2686 Con. And one of their issues was the side yard setback being reduced from 1.5 to 1.2. So just really quickly, you can confirm that that's the same as was approved in 2022?
Right, but the side yard setback is not on Con, it's on Poulin. The setback that abuts the properties on Con is the rear yard setback.
Okay.
And the rear yard setback is not being sought to be changed.
All right, because they had mentioned the side yard, I guess that was it. Oh, yeah, very quickly. So in your planning rationale, you say out of an abundance of caution, you've included the lot area variances.
Yes,
But that disappeared, I assume, in discussions with planning.
exactly.
Okay.
It does, not planning necessarily, building code services.
Okay,
Yeah, building code services said we will accept those variances.
so that's what's left over from.
Yes,
before. Okay,
that's
thank you
correct.
very much.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to the planning staff. I'd like to ask Ms. King if you have any questions, or sorry, any comments to make on this application.
No, I don't have any comments. Just to reiterate, so the zoning plans examiner did confirm that they don't need those lot area variances, but also with the rear yard setback, I did confirm that with her as well, that they are in conformity with the zoning bylaw. Aside from that, I really don't have any further comments, but if you guys have any questions, let me know.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Barrett, do you have any questions for planning?
Thank you.
Ms. McLean? Mr. Baltz?
Just so it's on the record, since we've discussed it several times, what's the rear yard setback?
So the rear yard setback changes. The rear yard setback changes in this case. It comes from section 144 of the zoning bylaw. It's alternative setbacks for low-rise residential development and particularly subsection 4. So this is for dwellings other than detached dwellings, and I'll just read it out. So if the principal dwelling units have a principal entry facing and fronting on a different street, like they're allowed to have the 1.2 meters on that interior yard rather than complying with like the typical rear yard setback. That it is covered in the zoning bylaw provision.
And so the actual setback here is 1.2. Okay, correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. King. Okay, I'd like to ask the public, are there anybody remotely or within the chamber here that have any questions or comments would they like to make on this application? We don't have anyone from the public, therefore, Mr. Hume, you have the last word if you'd like. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to ask the panel if they would like to reserve on this application. All those in favor to reserve, please raise your hands. This application will be reserved and you'll receive our decision within 10 days in writing. Thank you. Now move on to application number 6. This has to do with 3776 and 3780 Albion Road. I'm looking for Tim Bede. You'll need to push the microphone in, Mr. Bede. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you give us a brief description of your application today, sir?
Certainly. Would you like a presentation or just a brief description, Mr. Chair?
It's your call. You have 5 minutes to do either.
I brought a presentation and I'm happy to make it.
Great.
If we can address any questions preemptively. So while we're waiting for that to come up, my name is Tim Bede. I'm with FO10 Planning and Design at 396 Cooper Street in Ottawa. I'm representing the applicant here. I'd like to thank staff for their collaboration on this file as we work towards today and appreciate their staff report indicating no concerns. Next slide, please. So just a brief overview, the subject property consists of 2 lots, 3776 and 3780 Albion Road in the community of Emerald Woods Sawmill Creek in the city of Ottawa. The 2 properties have historically been occupied by single detached homes and have historically been independent lots. The area in question is predominantly low-rise, mid-rise residential character buildings, which large areas consisting of mostly single detached townhomes and low-rise apartment buildings. And the park, the city park, Emerald Woods Park, is directly behind the property abutting the rear lot line. Next slide, please. So the minor variances and severance requested today, there are 3 minor variances for driveway width, driveway typology, and eave projections. Although the zoning bylaw amendment in 2002 was crafted specifically to address this development, the provisions were written specifically for the previously anticipated plan unit development. That is no longer the case. The owner no longer intends to operate as a plan unit development, and therefore some of the provisions that were written and approved at that time need slight modifications of a technical nature to accommodate the proposed development in its current form. Importantly, no substantial changes other than improvements to the rear and front yards have been made to this project, and it is substantially the same as it was when approved in 2002. Speaking of the eaves projections specifically, there is was an interpretation previously that these projections weren't meant to be restricted. And I have submitted correspondence with the city planner at that time explicitly stating that the projections that were meant to be restricted were specifically on the sides and more to do with overlook and privacy and not the eaves specifically. And that's on the record. Is that better? Next slide. The severance is required to reestablish the historic lot lines for the two properties, which merged on title when they were both acquired by the same property owner. So essentially just reestablishing the historic lot lines and property dimensions for the property. Next slide, please. The history on this file is important. On the top right, you can see a previous iteration of the design, and on the bottom left, you can see the current iteration of the design. The council approved zoning provisions were based on the lower left version of the design, and the plans submitted to the committee are substantially the same as those that were submitted at the time. An ongoing theme for this application from the first iterations to now has been collaboration and cooperation with various engaged stakeholders, including the community, the councillor, and city staff. As you will see throughout the presentation, the project has evolved through multiple iterations, including reducing building height, reducing the loss of existing trees, reducing building massing, reducing unit count, reducing rear parking lot size, and increasing tree replacement and permeable areas in the yards. As a result of this approach, we believe that the proposed development is significantly better fit within the community, representing residential development. Next slide, please. So as approved in 2022, the back-to-back townhouse buildings consist of 2 buildings, each of 8.8 meters in height, each with 8 residential units, primary and additional dwelling units of 2 and 3 bedrooms. The majority of the existing trees are proposed to be retained, with over 10 new trees proposed to replace those which are required to be removed, including multiple trees in the front yard, and the private shared driveways in the public realm. Next slide, please. So we can see here in the renderings, this highlights the low-rise character of the development and the community fit in terms of the community character that was achieved in the redesign of the project from its initial design. The 2 buildings complement the residential character with peaked roofs, front-facing windows and doors, and ample window glazing, as well as street tree planting and permeable areas in the front yard. In this image here, we can see that the proposed central drive aisle is predominantly paved. That has been changed since this rendering was created. And on the next slide, we can see that there's been substantial changes which benefit the property. The central drive aisle is now flanked by permeable landscaping with trees in the front yard area. The rear parking lot here we can see here has also been reduced in size to best accommodate the existing trees and attempting to reduce the need for removal of some of those trees. And that was achieved through discussions with city staff. Next slide, please. We can see here proposed tree planting and landscaping in the rear yard to mitigate concerns of use of impermeable materials and to help to control and mitigate any stormwater or rainwater runoff. Next slide, please. Here we can see the eaves that are proposed, which require relief from the existing provisions of the zoning bylaw, are typical in dimension and nature. Again, they were meant to be permitted under the provisions, and this represents a slight technical change in the wording, but no changes have actually been made to the design, and the eaves would be permitted under section 65 of the zoning bylaw, which speaks to permitted projections. Next slide, please. Regarding the 4 tests, I'll start first with the official plan and in adherence and to the general intent of that plan. On the next slide, please. The subject property is designated neighborhood in the urban transect, and the minor variance and consent applications are consistent with the policies related to this transect in supporting and promoting additional infill development of a low-rise nature to help the city achieve its goal of 50-minute neighborhoods, as well as increase housing stock within these established communities. The building design is also low-rise in character, which is the permitted height within the neighborhood designation. Next slide, please. I'll move on to the intent of the zoning bylaw, which is on the next slide. So as mentioned, the proposal in its current form and function received approval for the zoning provisions in 2002. The required minor variances are to address certain provisions, specifically in their wording and semantics as they relate to technical aspects of the development, regarding the reduction in the parking drive aisle width of 2.4 meters, which previously mentioned in a plan unit development, which is no longer the case. However, the drive aisles and driveways have not changed in any way since that approval. Again, the permitted projections were not meant to include, the restriction on permitted projections was not meant to include the eaves, and the eaves are of a typical dimension and would be permitted otherwise under section 65 of the zoning bylaw. And the location or the typology of the drive aisles is meant to, thank you, Mr. Chair. The typology of the driveways and drive aisles also has not changed since the original approval, and is meant to accommodate both those front-facing units, which have individual driveways, and the rear-facing units, which would use the central drive aisle, which has been reduced in width and has now includes ample tree planting and permeable surfaces. Next slide, please. So in terms of the minor nature of the development and the application for relief from the zoning bylaw, the proposal relief is to permit the proposed development in the same form and function. There are no adverse impacts in terms of shadowing, overlook, or any rainwater, stormwater runoff. And the individual driveways which are proposed along with the shared driveway have been improved since the initial submission to ensure that they are legible, that they don't represent increases in impermeable paving on the site, and so they fit into the net character of the community. The next slide, please. I'll just get to that. And if you have any questions at the end, I can answer those questions. Regarding tree retention, we've been working with city staff to ensure as many trees existing on the property have been retained, and where not, ample tree replacement program has been put in place, specifically in the rear yard along the amenity area, as well as the front yard interface, which is 11-meter setback, which can accommodate a significant number of trees, which will improve the interface with the public right-of-way as those trees grow and improve. Finally, in terms of the severance, as mentioned, we believe that the severance meets the criteria of the Planning Act, and as you know, represents simply the re-establishment of the historical outlines and property dimensions on the property. So I believe that's my time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about this proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Bede. Just before we move on to questions from the panel, can you just clarify who the owners of the property is? We've got two different names. Who are the owners?
Where I am working for Concord Properties in Jordan Tannis as the applicant.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to move on to questions from the panel. And to that end, I'd like to ask Ms. McLean if he's got any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I just, on that ownership, we're showing Albion Apartments Limited as the applicant, and your letter refers to Concord?
I think through you, Mr. Chair, I think the legal ownership is through the Albion Apartments, and the day-to-day name of the company that we have been retained by to represent them here today is Concord.
So the application is correctly filed, it's showing the ownership of Albion. Okay, thank you. So with regard to the severance, I'm just not sure why you're doing this, the small parcels, they're slivers of land. If it's only one ownership, why do you not just come with a proposed severance line?
And so the severance also includes now a access right-of-way easement down the center to accommodate the proposed shared drive aisle. And simply due to the dimensions of those parts on the plan, there were some, I guess, leftover or pieces that didn't quite fit well within the rectangular shape of either, creating those triangular slivers. They don't serve particularly a purpose or function, but simply are requirements of the Planning Act ensuring that the proposed parts are all aligned and represented accurately.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand that. I'm not sure I understand those requirement for consent to the slivers of land, but I'll leave it at that. What was the density of the previous approval?
The previous approval was the exact density, form, and function as is today. So there's nothing that has been changed from the original zoning bylaw amendment approval by council in 2022. It was 8 units per building, 4 of which are primary dwelling units and 4 of which are additional dwelling units. That remains the same today. The minor variances requested today are simply to address the wording of the provisions that were approved at that time, which specifically reference the plan unit development, which is no longer the case, as well as more vague on the permitted projections, which were allowed on the development. And so the density and the form and the residential typology have not changed since that original approval.
So when I saw the pictures there, I thought it looked like a 3-story, I'm going to say low-rise apartment, and then a semi-detached beside it. But you're saying...
Yes, and thank you through Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to clarify there. The original image was what was originally submitted through the zoning bylaw amendment and through robust and prolonged discussion with the former council, the community and staff, that was reduced from the 3-story apartment building to what you see today, the 2 back-to-back towns with reduced unit count, height, parking requirements, and everything that would go along with reducing the unit yield on the site. And that back-to-back town development is the form and use typology that was approved at council in 2022. And so that slide was simply meant to represent the iteration and the evolution of the project over time in collaboration with all the various stakeholders engaged in the project.
So could you clarify the stair riser projections? So the previously zoning bylaw amendment wanted to keep them clear, those side yards clear, and now the E projection, I think I understand, but I'm not sure whether that stair riser projection is precluding anybody from going down that side yard.
The stair riser projection still allows for ample width to access that rear yard pathway. And the eaves are of a typical dimension. The provision that was included within the exception of the bylaw amendment said no permitted projections on the side of the building. In correspondence with the staff planner who wrote that provision in collaboration with my input, the intent was to restrict permitted projections specifically from the elevation that would cause privacy or overlook concerns like bay windows, decks or balconies, things of that nature. And inadvertently, and it's, I guess, a little bit vague wording, accidentally captured those at-grade and eave projections. But those were always included within the design from the very beginning and will not cause any undue adverse impacts as they are standard features on the building, which have been included within the elevations and renderings from day one of this most recent iteration and were discussed at the approval of the application at council in 2022.
And what is the distance between the stair riser and the lot line then, the clear area?
So the
walkway or
setback there on that side of the building is over 1.2 meters. They come out approximately 50 centimeters. And so you have just under a meter of clear way to walk down that portion of the development. They will obviously only be for that specific portion where the entrance is. The remainder of the pathway is of the full width. And they are more for access and not considered pathways from the right of way. And the zoning bylaw doesn't speak to any minimum widths for that area specifically. So they're all compliant with the zoning bylaw in that regard.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that's just take a minute here. Yeah, no, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McLean. Now I'd like to ask Mr. Baltz if you have any questions for the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'll ask forestry also at the end about this, but the tree issue, you said there's been redesign now to take, I guess, to address some of the comments from the forestry department. That there was a stormwater pond shown on the plans. Is that still in the backyard, in the rear yard?
The intention to include that is no longer necessary, which will help in terms of retaining more trees in that area.
Okay, so there's no exclusion area where trees can't be planted in the backyard anymore.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Baltz. Now I'd like to move on to Mr. Barrett. Do you have any questions for the applicant?
Just one quick question with regards to your community consultation. Were they included in the updated plan before us today? Have they been briefed on this plan?
Through the typical circulation period and process, they have been circulated on the updated plans and have had opportunity to comment. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So my questions are you aware of the conditions that are on this application and do you agree with them?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are aware of the conditions as per conversations held earlier today. I believe condition 9 and 10 are intended to be removed. But otherwise, yes, we concur with the conditions included within the staff report.
Okay, I'll ask our planning services to confirm that 9 and 10 are being removed. Is that true, Ms. Horn?
That's correct, Mr. Poulin.
Thank you very much. So we only have 10 Then you only have 10. Okay. I'd like to move on to our planning services. Penelope Horn, can you give us comments on this application?
Thank you, Mr. Poulin. Planning staff have no concerns with the application.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McLean, do you have any questions for planning services? Mr. Balks, any questions?
I guess maybe you can answer this. So my question about the trees have, or maybe forestry is online. Have the concerns expressed by forestry and their comments been addressed?
Thank you, Mr. Baltz. I'll allow for, my colleague in forestry to answer that.
Thank you, Ms.
Oh, Ms.
Forestry.
Young?
Hello, thank you for the question. I do still have some concerns. I think most can be addressed through the conditions. There are some issues where the TIR and the landscape plan aren't matching with respect to the stormwater plan, or stormwater pond, sorry, that you mentioned. So we need to make sure that those are addressed. My other concern is more in relation to the arrangement of individual parking spaces in the front. Sorry, my phone is ringing. Because there is a direct impact to one of the trees in the front, which could potentially be retainable if the parking spaces were just relocated. So that hasn't really been addressed yet. So I do still have some concerns with that.
Thank you. Mr. Balls?
Mr. Chair, can we have Mr. Bede address that point, perhaps?
Sure. Mr. Mead, can you comment on forestry's comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We also share the desire to retain as many trees as possible on the site and have been working with forestry and planning staff to do so. And at this time, the majority of the trees, 8 of 12, have been retained, some of which were not proposed to be retained in the initial submission. And a substantial tree replacement program has also been put in place to ensure specifically along the front right of way where tree 1 is proposed to be removed. Substantial multiple additional trees will be included where possible along the entirety of the frontage. The removal of tree 1 is an unfortunate necessity in this project as the front yard has been designed from the approvals in 2022 and has not changed since then to have those individual driveways for access to those units. The removal of parking for those individual units, front-facing units, would simply require additional parking in the rear, which would require the expansion of the rear yard parking spaces, which would have implications on trees that are proposed to be retained in the rear yard. And although unfortunate, as it always is when a tree has to be removed, we believe that there are no functional or feasible options within the front yard to relocate any parking spaces that would retain tree number 1.
Anything further, Mr. Baltz? Does that answer your question, Ms. Young?
Yes, I guess it does. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Barrett, do you have any questions for the applicant? Planning services? No. Okay, thank you very much. Now I'd like to see if there's anyone from the public, either remotely or in person, that'll have any comments to make with respect to this application. No one from the public. Thank you very much. Mr. Bede, you have the last word. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start by again thanking staff for their cooperation and collaboration on this file and for their report indicating no concerns with the development. I'd also like to reiterate that the proposed building typology, use, and function and site layout has remained the same from the original approvals by council in 2022. The applicant and team have worked closely to retain and replace as many trees as possible. And we believe that over time, a robust tree canopy and tree planting program will benefit not only this site, but the community at large as is necessary. It's important to also reiterate that this proposal represents low-rise infill missing middle development that will bring along 8 units per building, 16 in total, that are assisting in the city's objectives and bringing along more units within infill neighborhoods in a gentle and mindful way of the existing community and character. We think that the proposal is mostly technical in nature in terms of amending wording from previously approved provisions and represents no adverse impacts on the community. As regards to the severance, the application again is simply to re-establish those previously existing lot lines, which is very much within the character and lot fabric of the existing community. I thank you for your time today, Mr. Chair and committee members, and thank you again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beeden. Now I'd like to ask the panel if they would like to reserve on this application. All those in favor to reserve, please raise your hands. Your application is reserved, sir, so we will not be making a decision today, but you will receive our decision in 10 days.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I believe that concludes our,
No, we have to jump back to our second adjournment request
Okay.
for Tower Road.
perfect,
We do have a representative online.
great. And what's the name of the representative?
Edward Conway.
Mr. Conway, are you available?
So, Mr. Chair, just give me a moment here.
Sure.
Clear that camera. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. The lighting's not very good. So I am counsel to the applicant for 37 Tower minor variance. I've recently been brought onto this file, and having been brought on late, I reviewed it and wanted to get back in touch with the planning department to see if we could close the distance in regard to the various points that we had initially raised. So the planning department has a slimmed down version of our variance requests. So I come here today respectfully requesting an adjournment, if that's permissible, to mid-October, so that the planning department can have a fulsome amount of time to review our slimmed down requests, and I'll have an opportunity then to come before you with a much more, I guess, modest set of requests in regard to that property.
Perfect. So I'll put it to the panel. Panel, would you like to adjourn this application until October the 15th? I'll ask. Is there anyone here that'd like to speak to this adjournment request or remotely?
We have Nancy Wilson online from City View Community Association.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wilson? Are you available?
Hi, yep, I'm here.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. An adjournment request is fine with us. We'll come back again. That's okay. And we're just hoping that we'll be notified of what the changes are that the applicant is talking about.
So we're essentially dropping a number of our earlier requests and trying to come more in line with the planning department's requirements in order to reduce our requests to a bare minimum if possible. So that's really the gist of it.
Okay.
So there's 10 variance requests now. So you're going to be cutting it back, and you'll let us know what those cutbacks are.
Yeah, so I foresee 3 at the end, and they will essentially be the private approach, what I call the walkway, the private approach walkway. We're going to request a widened private approach walkway, but not as wide as it is now. We're going to request parking on Pender, which is the corner side yard, and much smaller request size than we had initially asked for. And that's essentially our 2 requests. The tower driveway is going to be narrowed significantly to satisfy the planning department's criticisms, which are obviously valid. So that's essentially what we're going to come back in October asking for.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Conway, can you commit to providing the community association with those exact variances you're looking for, so they're prepared to come to the next meeting?
Yes, I'd look forward to somebody, maybe Ms. Wilson, sending me her email so that I can communicate with her directly, or through she'll get notice, I guess, through the city, but I'll give her continuous communication between now and October 15th as to what our progress is, if she wants. So, Ms. Wilson, do you want to give me your email?
Sure, it's cityviewassociation@gmail.com. So cityviewassociation@gmail.com. Thank you very much for that.
Okay,
You're
I'll be
welcome.
in touch with you shortly.
Thank you.
Okay, so I would like to ask the panel if they would like to adjourn this application until October the 15th. All those,
Mr. Chair, so there's no recirculation required?
I don't believe so, staff.
No, not unless we're adjourning sine die, there won't be any further public notification.
So I'm wondering about that because the variances are changing completely, it sounds like. But we're
Well,
not
they're the
notifying.
All right.
Deputy Secretary, are we changing them that drastically that we need to recirculate?
I don't know what the changes are at this point, but it's the committee's policy that they can reduce or eliminate variances on the floor of the hearing. You cannot add to or increase an extent of a variance without re-notifying the public. But you can move closer to conformity without re-notifying.
So can we just get Mr. Conway, I guess, to confirm that all the variances that are going to be requested are more minor or less than what we have in these 10 here?
I'll do two things, council. I will, so I was planning to do notification myself through my law firm. And I was advised that the city does notification of the 60-meter group automatically. So I was going to do it on my own. So I could undertake to do the 60-meter notification myself and come back to you and provide you with that proof of notification, which was what I was planning to do anyway, until I found out that the city had notified the 60-meter group. So I can do that. I can also confirm, to the best of my knowledge right now, that the 3 that we're going to request in October are the same as the ones that are there today, but less intense variances. So that's my understanding as of today. Now, because in an abundance of caution, because some degree might be off, there might be 1 foot or 1 inch or something that's off, I don't want to commit to that in terms of my exact knowledge, because I wasn't actually planning to make a presentation today. I was actually, I had thought that my written request for an adjournment had been enough, and that was my ignorance. So I came on and asked for the adjournment, but I will give notification to the 60-meter group if that would satisfy the committee's concerns.
Well, I think we're going to review the your commitment when you send it to us. We'll take a look at it, and if it is greater than what has been requested to date, it will require recirculation.
Understood.
Okay. Anything further, Mr. Maltz?
No, thank you, Mr.
Okay. Sorry, I'd like to ask the panel if they'd like to adjourn this application until October 15, 2024. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application has been adjourned till the 15th of October. Thank you very much, Mr. Conway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I believe that ends our hearing today. Thank you all very much for your help, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.